going on, guys? As you could hear from the intro, this is going to be a little different kind of podcast today. It's the 10th one I've ever made, so to commemorate, I'm going to do a 2053 Miami Vice outlook. As well, I'm going to probably give my predictions on each division and each team. Just a quick one. Try not to be too long, but I know people like to hear about their own teams, so I'll give you guys some truthful opinions. To be honest, this is the second time I've done this podcast because I decided to do it one way the first time and I thought it was pretty terrible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my starting lineup and then talk about my bench players. I feel like that's probably the easiest way to do this because I was doing it originally position by position and it just sounded terrible. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my hitting, then my pitching, and I'll talk a little bit about each. So yeah. Starting off, batting first, newly acquired shortstop and coveted John O'Connor. He's off to a strong start, as expected, defensively and offensively, and I expect it to maintain. He was one of my key signings in the offseason, and I expect him to have a great year. And then number 2 hole, left fielder Lyndon Carter. Lyndon Carter he's playing better than expected. I don't think Boston expected what he was going to provide when they let him go. But he's thrived in Miami last year, batting OPS plus of 118 at a WAR of 1.6. His defense is suspect, and he's ideally a DH, but he's a serviceable enough left fielder, all things considered. Moving on to the 3 hole, this will be an interesting one. Nakamaru Aganu, the shortstop. He's finally getting into his groove. He's finally the player I projected he'd be many years ago when I was ripped apart for trading for him. I think I gave up Dave Morris. And with his defense, him and John O'Connor create such a strong middle of the infield that I'm just so excited for them. And so far this year, he's hitting at a ridiculous pace. I don't expect him to continue batting in the 3 hole, but I reward my players for their talents, and as long as he's hitting good, he's going to bat there. I'm not afraid to switch the lineup up. Batting in the 4 hole, Sergio Vega, third baseman. I knew I had a special player here when Boston wanted him in a trade, and although his ratings with my new scout dropped, I will never think of him negatively. I think of him as like a 70 player, even though my scout thinks 50. This year, he's hitting like a machine. Last year, he had an off-season, but so far this year, hitting 391, 481, and small sample size. I don't expect that to continue, but I expect like an OPS plus of 120-ish and solid enough defensive third baseman. Moving into the number 5 spot, traded for this offseason with Washington, is DH/third baseman Rafael Randon. So far, hitting expected. Never expected him to be much defensively. I brought him for the power and the bat, and so far he has no home runs, so he's letting me down on the power side. But he's batting 320, 370, and looking at his history, although it looks like he's a fragile player, I don't expect bad offense, and that's what I got him for, to bolster up the offense. That's why he's my DH. Moving into the 6th spot, the king of my team, the captain, the longest serving, I believe, will be re-signed. We'll never see the free agency market, regardless of what I have to pay him. Center fielder Manuel Morales. Off to a hot start, but that's to be expected. Stolen in a trade years back as a 20-year-old. He's been nothing but elite for me, and although batting in the 6th spot, I'm sure he'll move up to the 1, 2, 3, or 4 spot eventually. He's just having a weak start. And like I said, I do my roster my lineup a certain way, and my players understand that I accept that. And that's why we make the playoffs. Batting in the 7th hole, it's going to be a rotational spot, I feel, but right now it's catcher Jeff Stroud. Jeff Stroud was a big signing for me 2 years ago. For some weird reason, I gave him a 9-year deal. Feel like I'm going to regret it, but as long as that defense is elite, I don't really have to look for a catcher in the draft or to replace him, and I can re-sign players to be backups that doesn't cost a lot, and I can live with the fact I'm paying him $10-ish million a year. That's not the end of the world for what he can provide when healthy. Moving on to number 8, a last-minute signing, and I returned to the team when I let him go a couple years back. DH/horrendous outfielder, but going to be playing it, Dave Sparks. His eye is so strong that's what my number one thing is to look for, and he is it, and he's one of the dying breed of the high eye. So seeing a 458 on base, it's going to be very hard to take him out of the lineup, although that 278 slugging is dreadful. He hasn't really provided much this year, and worst case, I can always let him go because I only signed him for $3.8 million, and that's not the end of the world. Finally, in the number 9 spot, funny enough, a first baseman batting in the 9th spot. How weird, but that's how it is. Lefty Claudio Lopez. one of my draft picks from the first round a couple years back. I always knew he was going to be a stud. He's slowly getting into the role, and I know it might take him a little bit longer to develop, but I like the fact he has high loyalty and high work ethic. I expect him to fill his bars and be elite. Right now he's not, but we have a strong enough squad around him. That's not the end of the world if he's not the best. Okay, well, that's my starters. Moving on to because I have a 14-person bench, 14 batters. I have 5 guys on the bench. I'm sure it'll eventually go down to 13, 12, but right now it's staying like this. Then I'll start with my catcher. So my second catcher is Nelson Stewart. Nelson's getting up there in age, but as long as he produces, he'll remain on the team. 37-year-old on a $2 million contract. Last year batted 245, 324. Not the greatest, but he was a solid catcher, and that's all I look for is defense first. He's a good backup this year. I'm sure he'll split games with Stroud the way Stroud plays. Moving on, we have first baseman, third baseman Pedro Hernandez. His defense got him up to a 93 rated first base pretty quickly. He's not your prototypical first baseman with absolutely no power, but as long as he has that high contact, high avoid K, he'll find himself getting some playing time. Moving on, we have 2 middle infielders. One of them cost me compensation, and I can't believe I paid it, but the fact that he's probably never going to see the field as a starter. Cam Cap Wilson. 32-year-old, signed to a 3-year deal. Not the worst deal, $8 million a year, could probably be traded eventually. Had a great year last year, but just has to find a way of cracking the lineup. When he does, I expect big things. Probably just play second base for me. In fact, he was not slotted in there on this side, so he's slotted in there now. Moving on, my other infielder, who I adore more, but his stats are starting to decline, Ricardo Salazar. Never been an over 100 OPS plus player, but always been a solid defender, so he always finds a way on my team. And finally, he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for an injury to Mario DeLoyan, but right now my outfielder who can play all 3 positions is Cooper Sherman. He's just a backup and a late inning defender for Carter if things get rough, or Sparks if we need to hold them down. But once things change and once DeLeon comes back in a couple weeks, I'm sure he'll get sent to the minors or claimed by one of you, because you guys all claim all my guys anyways, so you might as well. Yeah, that's my offense. You liked it? It was pretty good, right? I see a high-hitting team, and I focused a lot of pitching. I just realized that hitting is just going to be hard to get, so when you have it, cherish it, and pay them well. And then now we move on to my rotation. I expect big things from this rotation. My number 5 suspect, but that's because I got youth waiting to take it over, and right now the youth is playing all right in the minors, so if my number 5 doesn't pick it up, he might be finding himself packing soon. Number 1 is obviously Arthur Quick. Former Cy Young, got injured last year, had a solid year up until that point, and then came back for the playoffs to win 2 games. Game 5 against Moose Jaw, and then one of the games against Boston. He's slotted in the number 1 spot. Number 2 is Robbie Gilliam, who I got from Alabama in a trade earlier this offseason. He was rewarded with a contract extension in a number 2 spot. So far, 8.1 innings, 0 ERA. He shut down the Shelltown Shockers, but that was obviously going to happen. Probably happen all year. Moving on to number 3, the second player we got in a trade for Alden Plummer is lefty pitcher Luis Flores. His stamina is less to be desired, but he gets it done while he's out there. And we have a strong enough pen that if he can only go 6 innings, it's not the end of the world. In the number 4 slot, we have former second-round pick George Rucker. George Rucker was taken after Ronald Jefferson. And I kept him in the end, and he's rewarded me with some solid years when I almost let him go. He's a career 44, 43, 4.00 ERA, but you got to understand that I threw this guy out to the Lions in the first few years. 9 WAR over his years. On this year, he's projected for 13. Obviously, not going to hit that. He'd probably be about a 4 WAR this year, and he's always been a solid number 4. And finally, number 5, Francisco Castro, who I signed this offseason to a 2-year deal. Not exactly lighting up like I expected, but I expect things to change. He can be dispensed, though, so it's not the end of the world if I have to eat some salary in the minors for a bit, because I got some bodies down there waiting. Going to the pen, my closer, and I won't even call him a closer because I have 3 closers, but my number 1 of my 3-headed monster is right-handed pitcher Craig Sedman. Craig Sedman just simply does not let people score. He had an off year last year with a 2.12 ERA, but the year before he was 1.01. And before that, I threw him to the lines a little too early. This year, he's on pace for a 0 ERA. He's obviously not going to hit that. High Ks. If he gets his walks down, his K to BB rate will be unstoppable. Number 2 of the monster head is Justin Sutherland. I brought him up finally last year as he was sitting in the minors dominating, and he didn't disappoint with 42 innings, 1.69 ERA. Just an overall monster. Moving on to the number 3 of the heads is another lefty. I like my lefty pen, Don McKenzie. He just re-signed for $2 million after this year. Don has never let me down since being in the pros. Always had an ERA plus of 105 or higher. And 105 was the outlier because the others was like 135, 160, 168. So point is, this guy's a freak. This guy he's not even a flamethrower either. He only throws 91 miles an hour and has a changeup. 109 rated changeup at that. Holy shit. Today's his birthday too. Happy birthday, bud. Hope you have a good day. Moving on, 2 more lefties in my pen of 6. My pen has 4 lefties, 2 righties. That's pretty cool. This guy, I don't know how long he'll last, but if I send him down, someone will claim him, so I kind of have to keep him for the time being. Gerardo Belli Pacheco. He's always been somewhat of a to me, but he's finally gotten it together, and his slider is insane. The most dispensable but most expensive reliever I have left is Ronald Barbara Jackson, grabbed from OCD in a trade a couple of years back. He had a really good first year, really suspect second year, and so far this year he's been dreadful. That was to be expected, and like an idiot, I re-signed him for a 2-year deal, so I don't know. Maybe I'll send him to the minors and eat the deal or trade him at the deadline. Finally, my long reliever is Dan O'Keefe. He's also a pitcher, but there's just no way for him to get into the rotation, so he long relieves, and I'll try to spot start him from time to time. It was his birthday 5 days ago. Happy birthday. He's only 26 years old. That's a trend with Miami, a lot of youth that I have to send down because the options wasted. It sucks because everyone keeps taking them. But that's what you got to deal with when you're a good team like mine. And probably the best team in the league, to be honest, but I regress. So yeah, that's my 25-man roster. I know everyone was so excited to hear that, and that was why they came. So to be a little more excited, I'm going to tell you a couple prospects I like and what they could expect. Got Greg Scott, who, if he stays healthy, should come up this year. Akio Yomoyama, another starting pitcher who should be up this year. Second baseman, Nathan Tom. You guys don't give a shit about this stuff. You guys want to know about your teams and what I think about you guys. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to say every team's name. I'm going to look at your team quick. I'm going to tell you what I think of your team. That's it. All right. Let's get started. Boston. Still the same. A lot of their weak players are relievers, so they still got a high amount of offense. Still be in the playoffs. You like that? Just like that. Dillonvale. Let's look at their team. Holy shit. A lot of youth. A lot of good players, but they're young. And they need to develop, so I see this being a learning year. I see close to 500. Next. Shelltown. Don't care. He sucks. Oh man, I was going to give this guy credit, but all his crappy players are actually players he needs offensively, so you better hope he wins every game 1-0, or else that 1-4 is going to become 2-8, it's going to become 3-12, it's going to become 4-16, and 20-100, and I don't know. Point is, he's going to suck this year. Good. Anywho, moving on. Final team in the AL East, New England. This guy's too busy being a dad, letting his team get neglected. I think this guy was the young up-and-coming GM, the Theo Epstein. He's letting me down. He's like Billy Bean. But looking at his squad, pretty solid. I see him fighting for like a 500-ish record, being on the below side of it, though. A couple years away. So in the AL East, I think that Miami's going to win. Boston's going to finish second. Shelltown's going to finish third. Dillonvale's going to finish third. Shelltown's going to finish fourth. New England's going to finish fifth. Moving on to the AL Central. All right, let's start. Houston. Oh, man, they gotten better. But still, I see weaknesses. Good pitching staff, good center fielder, good outfield, yeah, this team's going to compete in that division, but then again, I didn't say much. Number 2, Cincinnati. Cincinnati had a huge blow recently. They were complaining about, oh, yeah, David Hewitt got hurt, sucker. But anyways, one team doesn't make or break your team, or else teams would finish dead last after losing players, which they always do. Elite pitching staff, good first baseman, doesn't have much. He has a solid outfielder. Caesar, my former catcher, is his catcher. Ugh, he sucks. I don't know. I don't see this guy continuing at a 800 pace, but no one will. I see this guy sitting 85 wins. I think they're going to miss playoffs this year. Bold take. Third in the division, Winterfell. Winterfell looks dreadful. Oh, this is going to be a bad year for Winterfell. Well, my scout thinks it's going to be a bad year. Right now, the worst team I've seen. yeah, you guys are gonna. It's gonna be cold up there. I'd fire sale if I could. Moving on, Toronto. Toronto is in the same boat. A lot of relievers at the bottom there, so maybe not so bad. A lot of pitching. Jason Sharp's going to be out there with Steve Evans, it looks like. If Weiss, Young, and Romero can hold it down, they're young, though, man. That team's gonna, this is a rebuilding team, too. So push along this year, but I see like a 400-ish winning thing. And finally, Omaha to Lincoln. The Beef. The Beef are actually, comparably speaking, the third best team in the division. But that ain't saying much. Yeah, they have some holes, but they got good. Everyone has good pitching. They have a good catcher, Sergio Romero, good third base, second base, good infield. So yeah, I see a team competing for third, maybe battling Cincy for second, but Houston's going to win this division, and Toronto and Winterfell will be at the bottom. Moving on, we got the AL West. We'll just go with the standings to start. Seattle looks terrible. Let me see if, yeah, same with OSA. Oh, this is a hot start. Who have they faced? Albany. They must be bad. I know they did recently switch, but I think the new guys seem pretty cool. Oh, man, that's just a lucky start. They're not going to do well. No. This team's going to be probably last place, still a league. Moving on, Richmond played the most games. Probably the pretty good team. Good pitching, good first base, center field, another first base, catcher, blah, blah, blah. Some key positions near the bottom, though, but with that division and the voting, as we saw, it's not exactly going to be much of a battle. I see him finishing in first. Let's see those Seals that Seattle took on. They're better than Seattle. Why did they lose? Ben Menz has to get accustomed to his new place. Only 67 OPS plus. I knew he had to be doing bad for them to be doing bad. Juan Valeris is on place for 7 more. Oh, that's a decent catcher. That's a solid eye. Oh, actually, this guy's a terrible rated catcher. This guy should not be catching. Anyways, moving on. Seattle's a solid team. A couple Blues. I like them. Probably second in the division right now. Going on to Philly. Oh, God. Philly beat me in the finals 1 year. I'll never like this team. Oh, God. Dillard's good. Wagner's all right. Gibson's good. A lot of older guys. If I was them, I would probably fire Sale. See how their minors look. Yeah, they need minors help too. Well, they just have a ton of pitchers and a shortstop. Rivera looks pretty all right. But if I was them, I would probably try and sell Jan, Scott, Clay, Oddly, Suzuk. Zuck? Wow, that's cool. There's no A on the end. Yeah, get rid of those guys because, they're not going to do well this year. And finally in that league, Long Beach, right now off to a weak start. And I can see why Richmond overwhelmingly destroyed the voting because this team is going to be battling for probably fourth spot. Good pitching, but nothing else. It's all right, though. Let's see their minor leagues. Dreadful. Okay, my scout might suck, but yeah. So I think out of this league, the 6 teams that make the playoffs will be Boston, Miami, Houston, Cincinnati, Richmond, and boy, that number 6 is going to be dreadful. Dillonvale. I think that's going to be. I think I win. I think Houston, me and Richmond share a bye. Boston finishes 4, Houston 3, Cincy 5, Dillonvale 6. It's on record. I'll try and write it down and remember that, but I probably won't. I should write it down now. No. Anyways, moving on. We got the NL to talk about, and I don't want this thing to be forever. It's already 18 minutes. God damn. Well, enjoy this in the morning, Richmond, when you're doing the simulating. We'll start with the NL East, and right now the leaders of it, which let's see if it's going to be for much longer. I don't know about that. Is Charlotte. Charlotte, everyone's favorite. Oh, man, at least they're smart. They're getting young. Got a lot of young talent led by Stu Kirk. They got a couple good pitchers, a solid shortstop. This team is the team of the future. Good for K-Dog. Happy to see that. Let's see the minor leagues. Minor leagues have some players, but I don't know if he'll be staying at the top for long. So, yeah, especially with the next teams I'm going to be talking about. In the number 2 spot, Washington will be taking over first place soon and probably holding it the whole year. As per usual, Ted builds a monster. Too many Blues. 2 catchers, a third baseman, a shortstop, his entire pitching arsenal. He has Fujihara, who's projected to win the MVP. Let's see how he started so far this year. -4 WAR. That will not happen. Yeah, he should probably win the entire NL East, unless this team. The battler with him is going to be Orange County, who I'm talking about next. All his pitching, elite second baseman, elite third baseman, elite center fielder. Pretty solid put together team. Dave, I think his name's Dave, knows what he's doing. He has a really good minor league system with some players that are ready to be called up, like Lake and Tay if he wants, so he has options. Yeah, I see him in Washington battling it out so far. Charlotte's going to probably drift off a bit. And looking at Chicago, Chicago's probably going to finish in the 3 spot because they got some bodies, but not enough bodies to compete. Good pitching staff, but who doesn't? Good left fielder, good catcher. Good 2 catchers, but what are they going to put one at DH, I guess? Hoyt Foster in right field, Juan Hernandez in left field. Carlos Gomez, who's a young Mexican pitcher, looks like he's going to be pretty good. Started off strong so far. Dan Young looks like he's so-so. And the final team so far, 0-5, Las Vegas. Las Vegas is in the East. Him and Charlotte will probably be battling for last place in this league, or in this division, because other than pitching, they don't have any offense. And although pitching does help, with absolutely no offense, there's no way his team's going to win 1-0 every game. So to recap, I think it's going to be Washington 1, Orange County 2, Chicago 3, Charlotte 4, Las Vegas 5. Moving on to the NL Central, we start with the improbable San Antonio team in first, but will that last? Absolutely not. 4 blues, 4 greens, and a lot of reds. I see a young up-and-coming team with an active owner, hopefully, and a rebuilt minor league system that could probably compete. If they're smart, maybe even sell these youth players and get a plethora of players, because Jesus Castillo is a 23-year-old freak. And while he will be a freak and be nice to have, you could probably get a couple pieces for him. Same with Dan Tomasin. So yeah, I see this team battling near the bottom, which is good for them because going forward they need more top-end picks they need to capitalize on. Number 2 team in the division is Hillsboro Hops. Doc always puts together a solid little team, and I saw him make a run recently. I think this is the year he makes the playoffs. Do I think he'll be winning the division? I will let you know when I'm done looking at them. Right now, though, I think he's a wild card team at worst. He's led by Gomez, Elias, and Harden, 3 pitchers. He has some youth in Benjamin Hernandez. His team is mostly starters, I can't lie, but Walter Brooks looks like a solid center fielder. Augusto Barrios at first, Robbie Mule at third base, Max Daughtery at shortstop. I mean, he has a good infield, so if they can maintain it and the pitching can come through, wild card at worst. The team everyone expects to win the division, although he did make a lot of trades. I mean, geez, this division has not the greatest amount of teams so far, but Alabama, Kent Clark, Luis Polanco, Avery Stewart, could they lead this team? So far, Clark's pitching like a freak. So is Polanco, and not so much Avery Stewart. So if they can get some out of Avery Stewart, this could be a sleeper team for the division. But right now, I see Hillsboro ahead of them. Moving on to the 4th team, Albany. Albany left recently and left a decent team. This team should also be battling. Minor league aside, not bad. More blues than I've seen so far. And led by Gustavo. Every team is just led by their starting pitching. Shane Brock in left field, 31-year-old. Carlos Martinez at first base, and Lyle Murdoch at third. I can see them battling for the 2 spot. How about the final and 5th team, New Jersey? Dreadful. New Jersey will be picking last, probably battling for the first overall pick, and it looks like it's fine. Looking at their team, it doesn't look like they have any ugly contracts that are going to handcuff them going forward. And checking out their minor league team, pretty solid pitching, so if they address the hitting and get some key hitters in the next few drafts, they should be good going forward. I can see why people are looking at Alabama, but ultimately I think Hillsboro is going to finish first, Alabama 2nd, San Antonio 3rd, Albany 4th, and New Jersey rounding out, battling for top 5 overall pick and finishing last. Finally, we are going to the final division. If you guys are still here, thank you. If you're not, thank you. Anyways, moving on, we will be talking about the NL West. Talk about everyone's team that they think is going to win it. And, jeez, he has turned his team into a monster team. Los Angeles. Yeah, this team is a favorite to win it all, not just this division. My goodness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16 blues. Fills out the rest of the roster with greens. Fuck, Plasma knows what he's doing. Sorry for swearing. I got one in. He has a mixture of offense and pitching. A lot of teams are lacking on the hitting side. He has 2 great catchers, a good center fielder. Oh, man. Yeah, Los Angeles is probably running away with this division. The only team I think that he can compete with, let's check it out right now, is Cookville. Cookville is a solid team as well, don't get me wrong. They got a lot of hitting as well. I think it's going to be this is the division that had all 5 votes, too. They have 3. They have Dave Morris is your number 4 pitcher. You have a good team. Shortstop, Alberto Ramirez. Catcher, Julio Rivera. A thorough Espichon at second base. William Parker in left field. They're a good team, too. I'm not going to make any more predictions on who I think is going to win the division until I'm done. Because moving on to number 3, Moose Jaw. Moose Jaw's good, too. Like, these teams would win some divisions. All 3 of these teams would lead other divisions. Richard Jones, Leonard Hall, Larry Gill all pitching. Clarence Hall in left field. Antonio Acevedo at catcher. I hate him. I had him before. I hate him. Wayne Cornford at left field. Pretty solid young kid, hitting pretty good. I don't think he's going to finish first, to be honest. The other 2 teams are better, but nothing wrong with being a wild card team. In the number 4 slot of this league so far, Steel City. Steel City looks pretty strong, all things considered. Minor league system needs some work. They have Mahea and Hoffman who they could potentially sell to fill up their minor league system pretty quickly. If they did a quick fire sale, Steel City would be back to competing in about a year or 2. Right now, not so much. And finally, the final team everyone was waiting for, Port Orange. Port Orange is pretty young, pretty solid, led by Lockett, Song Gong, and John Snyder. Has the outfielding and Ryan Payne and Lawrence Bowman to compete, as well as the first baseman Pat Lewis, third baseman Frank Barnes. Pretty solid squad. Do I think they're going to win the division? Ultimately, I don't think they do. I think at the end of the day, 1 is Los Angeles, 2 is Cookville, 3 is Port Orange, 4 is Moose Jaw, rounding it out. Number 5 is Steel City. With that being said, I'm going to boldly predict my 6 wildcard teams. I got Los Angeles finishing first. I got Washington winning the East, finishing second. I got Hillsborough winning the Central, finishing third. I have Cookville finishing 4th. I have Orange County finishing 5th. And in the 6th spot, I have Port Orange, who I have finishing 3rd in the division. So they'll be the number 6 team. That's who I think is going to make the playoffs this year. Now, who do I think is going to win each side? I'm going to boldly pick that Richmond is going to represent the AL. I can't pick myself. That would be too lame. And I think Los Angeles is going to represent the NL. And ultimately, Los Angeles will be the champions at the end of this year. Looking at the time, damn near 30 minutes. You guys are going to hate me for this, but I appreciate if you stayed around. Try to make them short in the future. But without anything else, it's Nick. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good night.